First thing I think I'd go to is the hedgerows. I know, Jerry, thank you, and the group you came to meet me there a while ago. The information we have at the moment, and I don't know, you might be able to correct me on this, from the department who are in on the Climate Action Committee, there's a possibility you could actually reduce agricultural emissions by 8 to 10% with all of it that's around the country. But they are saying to us that they hope to be able to get into this 2030 figures, whatever they mean by that. You might be up to speed, Jerry, on that. Just a question for you. There's 137,000 farmers around the country. Is it worrying for you, say you said you had 43,000 members, that only 1 in 3 farmers would be engaging with you, you know, or going on looking at new technology or whatever? Is that worrying trend? Are the other farmers, in your opinion, you know, is there, I don't think there's enough of probably private guys out there that there must be people not engaging with anybody. Is that worrying? I'll go back to you, Tom, on to follow up on Deputy Pringle's question. With trying to make, you know, trying to get farmers into the niche of doing things better with new technology and the new programs and the research that you do, and say, I think, did you say something like 165 million, whatever part of it is government or whatever, 70% of it or 60%, that would it not be worthwhile that we make sure we have a tie-up with those private planners around the country? I know that FRS, as you said, done the glass for ye, and the private planners would have done it, that you wouldn't have the resources. But would it not be worthwhile that you try and form some relationship, that whatever new technology comes, be it carbon navigators, be it, you know, whatever you're doing up in making things better, when it's the, say, state funded, that, and I know you've said that it only was the sort of the price of keeping it going, or questions, would it not be worthwhile talking to the likes of them? You said that there's a problem of a yearly thing. Did you highlight that if it was a 3-year thing, it might work better, no more than to make it work, that it's not about them and us and ye and them, that it would be maybe better in the whole thing of a country to, that the information is out there, be you a planner on your own, or be you Teagasc, or be you ACA has been talked about, that it might be helpful that way. Second of all, and this would be to Jerry, or maybe someone will take this. At the moment, farmers are under pressure. They're getting kicked the living daylights out of them day in, day out by, look at media at the moment, that if you're a farmer now, you're nearly put down your head. But that's the way that it's gone if you're producing food. And like, everyone has to realise you need food to live, or if you haven't it, you're going nowhere. Is there any research done by Teagasc? You know, there's this big veganism debate and all that, to put our chest out and hit back at those that want to be alarmist, you know, and are pumping a lot of money into putting out messages there that mightn't be altogether the greatest message in the world for human health. Thirdly, we import, you know, soya and a lot of stuff like that. Is there any programme being researched that we could sort of do a bit more? We haven't the ideal climate, and I'd be the first to say that, that we could do a bit more to work, maybe get more protein stuff here, the way that to reduce bringing in stuff from out abroad. Jerry, you mentioned there that the bigger beef farmer is, you know, making a few quid or whatever. The reality of it is, though, that we have to deal with the family farms, whether we like it or whether we don't, because that's what most farms are made up of. Have we done any research on trying to see would a cow work 2 calves with enough milk and do it profitably, her own, and another one with her? Like those, I looked at a thing in Austria there of flexi or fleck cows, and they looked sort of a bit acceptable to both sides, especially with the type of animal. I have to agree with Deputy Cahill, I will say. I think the chief to show leadership in the whole dairy sector. I believe that a statement, and maybe I'm incorrect, you know, a statement went out in media that you hadn't thought about the calves. Jesus, we should have thought about calves. But on top of that, we have to cut to the chase in this. We cannot be breeding calves we're brought up, and every farmer is, be you a dairy, beef or sheep farmer, or a pig farmer or whatever, you're brought up that when an animal is born, you'll stay up all night with it to make sure that animal lives. And we cannot have a situation that a calf is coming out worthless. And I don't care whether it offends some people or not, we have to cut to the chase in some of these crossbreds or jerseys, because it's not doing, it won't create the image. We want the best of animal welfare, and it's not going to create the image that we require. And I think you need to cut to the chase in that. Do you still agree with derogations and all that, like when we talk about climate change? Because, or are we, do you look at maximum stocking rates? You know, because like I'm hearing there's 3.6 and 7 cows to the hectare. And like in normal circumstances, that's gone a bit outlandish in my opinion. That we need to sort of bring things normality, and in fairness to the British Frisian or even some of the Holsteins, we need to start producing a calf if we're going to bring a working relationship. One time ago, in my neck of the woods, you might have 10 cows, but every farmer went down the south, they called it that time, and they bought 5 or 6 or 10, but they were right calves. They were proper, you know, and they were Hereford, some of them, and they were, you know, and they were, but they made good cattle. We're gone away from that now, and I think you need to show leadership, in my opinion, to see can we haul that back. In the line of the single farm payment, what is your views on that going into the future? In the line of, you know, will there be more sorted towards environmental stuff? And in the line of, I know that you've done work on anaerobic digestion, and yes, there are certain things, and you talk about forestry there, but at the moment, what involvement are you inputting at the moment? At the moment in Clearfell or Plantain, it's at a standstill because environmentally we're gone mad as a country and everyone is objecting to everything now. And have you any input in that at the moment? And can you put more of an emphasis, like from Donegal down to Clare and out to the River Shannon, and maybe you put a bit of Monaghan and you'll put a bit of West Cork into it. You have more marginal land that isn't ideally suited for dairying. There's no point in saying this. There'll be parts of it, yes, but on the whole, no. Is there an emphasis being put on how we can make them sustainable as beef farmers, and there'll be sheep in some of it, but on the environmental side of it as well, you know, there's no point coming out sort of nearly saying, well, a beef farmer anymore should be reared in the calves from the person that's the dairy, because all they'll do is drive them mad at that. Can we work something that, if, in my opinion, if we could have the cow, and I've looked at different types of cows, that if they could make sure you'd rear the second calf, that you'd have enough of milk but not too much milk. It could be a way forward that it both help the dairyman if they were producing the right product. And the other thing, Teagasc, you see, when they come out with something, it was nearly the gospel one time. Do you know what I mean? Let's be honest. And a lot of farmers went down this bull beef route because they were, you know, it was the new thing to go at, and they were told it was the way forward. But like a lot of people got left with a lot of stuff, and well, you have to be very careful in where you steer people. What's your views on or are you involved in the task force in the line of trying to have an input there to see, you know, that have you research done on the 36 months or all of the different criteria that they're looking for? That's it. Thanks.
Again, I'll take some of the points and my colleagues can, anything that I don't get around to German, they'll pick up. Senator Daly raised a very important point in relation to the incoming Commission and the remarks of the President of the Commission recently in regards to the Green Deal. And I think for us, this would be the key challenge in terms of the progression of agriculture, is the growth in chemical N, particularly on dairy farms in recent years. It's clearly a cause of concern. And there's two strategies that we would strongly advocate. This is, Frank referred to earlier, the importance of farmers moving away from calcium ammonium nitrate to what we recommend as the alternative, protected urea, because that is the same efficacy in terms of grass yield, but it doesn't have the negative consequence that CAN does of ammonia and greenhouse gas emissions. That's one point. Secondly, and probably of many respects for the long-term ability of the sector to harness the use of nitrogen, is to encourage farmers to adopt clover in their swards. And like we know from our research that the efficiency of chemical nitrogen at the moment on average is only 24%. So for every unit nitrogen is used, is actually only 24% is utilised to produce livestock products. The rest either goes into the atmosphere or into the groundwater. We know from our work in Clonakilty, for example, that greater use of clover in swards is not only makes economic sense, it's worth about an extra €50 per hectare in terms of per cow rather, in terms of additional milk solids. But most importantly, from the environmental point of view, the efficiency jumps from that average of 24% to 40%. So there is a huge challenge here. There's no question about it, because nitrogen nitrogen sales are a very obvious indicator that everyone can point to. And we can talk all we like as the day is long about all the various promotion campaigns, etc., unless we can turn the curve in relation to chemical use, it's going to continue to be an issue of contention, and it's going to affect our ability to adhere to our ammonia and greenhouse gas targets. So I think we have the technology to deal with it. Again, like in a lot of things in agriculture, it's to encourage the adoption of alternative practices is forever the challenge. But I think there's a huge awareness and increasing awareness among farmers of the need to tackle these issues. And I certainly noticed that now at recent conferences we've held. So hopefully that will be manifest in actual decision-making on farms. Deputy Fitzmaurice raised a number of issues. I don't have the figure on hedgerows. Because I say it's a highly speculative estimate, because there's a huge, first of all, the hedgerows are quite varied in terms of species, and that obviously complicates any estimation. We don't have an idea yet, or a good idea anyway, even on the biomass involved, let alone the variety of species. But so I'm not in a position to comment on your figure of 8 to 10%. Look, there's a lot of areas that are under continuous review as far as the so-called national inventory of greenhouse gases is concerned, and that's always the case. And as science evolves and gives us more concrete results, that then leads to the incorporation of different estimates of sequestration potential and mitigation into the national inventory. I would say we're a long ways off yet. My own view would be that we're set now on a path up to 2030 in regards to the current inventory, in regards to the measures and targets. But beyond that, certainly one would hope that we will have the information that will enable us to broaden the sequestration options. You raise a very important point in relation to the 43,000 farmers, and of course that doesn't represent the totality. Some farmers, as you rightly say, don't feel the need for any advisory support, and that's fine. They don't see the advantage in discussion groups, or maybe don't like participating in discussion groups. There is a number of others then, of course, that exercise their entitlement to use private advisors. But one thing that's very interesting, and it's a very important part of our mission, we hold a variety of open days. That's probably the big difference in ourselves and the private sector. Everyone is invited, there's no cost, and if you look at the breakdown, typically it's about 60-40. 60% of the attendance is typically our clients, and 40% would be non-clients. And all that information that they get at open days is freely available, and we get the same kind of ratio that attend our marquee at the ploughing. Naturally, we'd like to have more, but I think there are ways of getting our message seems to get out there in different fora. Tom has addressed the issue of the relationship with the ACA, and I think to reiterate what Tom said, we're very open to having a memorandum of understanding if that would help the dialogue. Again, most of our research information is publicly available, but we do put on tailor-made presentations througthrough our Connect Ed program, and we would very much see that as an efficient vehicle for ensuring that, insofar as ACA members want access to our latest research, they can get access to it. I'll ask maybe Frank to come in relation to the whole area around veganism and flexitarianism and all that. One area that we certainly are absolutely convinced about, and I think the evidence is there in abundance, the comprehensive and nutritional benefits of meat and dairy products, I think, in that you don't have to add in supplements to create that well-rounded nutritional package, if you like, that we all need for our health. That's one thing that's, I think, very evident. But more importantly, we know from our work that the grass-based system actually provides additional nutritional value, and we certainly have documented that now in recent years in work at Moorpark. The issue of low-value calves, look, none of us is unaware of the challenge here, but I would say it's a complex issue, because I don't think it's all down to jerseys, and certainly there has been a huge change in recent times in the size of the calf, because the dairy farmer wants an easy calving cow, and a cow that will return to milk quickly and get fertile and so forth. We had a massive problem less than 20 years ago with fertility of our dairy cows. It virtually collapsed, and we're only getting to the point now where we're recovering position we had before that collapse in fertility. So I don't think it's as simple as saying if we got rid of all these jerseys and jersey crosses that we'd solve the issue. We wouldn't, actually. Our preference is to look at the opportunities that exist for selecting our calves. When you go into the mart and you have full information and it's transparent on the potential value of that animal to see before you in terms of their beef potential, and that's going to happen in the not too distant future. We also argue that the selection of bulls, appropriate bulls for dairy cows in regard to their beef traits with the dairy beef index, within the spread of quality, we would say choose the best that delivers the best outcome in beef terms, and that's, I think, the way it's going to happen. But like it or not, and we're all aware of this, before the dairy quota, there was 80% of beef was sourced from the dairy herd. That's now at 60%, but it's growing. It's inevitable there will be more dairy calves coming onto the market, so to speak, to be reared as beef animals, and that's a challenge for all of us. I look, the options that you propose there, Deputy, certainly they're important. I mean, we do think there's a huge contribution can be made for the rearing of dairy calves, but I take your point that some sort of a combination might be attractive if we can get an animal that's that good. One of the problems, as you know, in the suckler sector is the efficiency metrics are very poor. You know, we seem to have a real problem. And for example, one metric that unfortunately has been stubbornly poor is the failure of an awful lot of suckler cows to produce a calf a year. You know, and it's worsening. And that's a massive. You raise the issue of derogations. Of course, the derogation is very important, but it ties in with Deputy or Senator Daly's point in relation to nitrogen. I've been, if you look north of the border, for example, it's very evident that if we don't manage to implement the measures that are laid out in the Marshall Bay and cost curve, there will be restrictions in relation to end use in particular. There's no question about it, because that's the easiest way to do it. And take Northern Ireland. I mean, because of the concerns there with ammonia, the restrictions there now have virtually halted any development in the dairy industry. So we're very alert to that issue. I don't think I'm not aware, Frank, if you were, of the stocking rates that Deputy mentioned.
Some of the milking platforms would be.
Probably on the platform maybe, but not in terms of the average across the farm. I don't think that would be that. I agree with you in relation to single farm payment, definitely. We do anticipate greater restriction in regards to environmental issues. Yes, and we are involved, maybe Frank you might pick up on that, we are involved in the task force, and we were involved in the forum before that. We have a specific role to play in relation to the provision of technical advice. And in relation to afforestation and so on, you see, I've been making the argument for some time now that if you look at our mitigation or sequestration measures, forestry is the single biggest plantation of forestry, new forestry, is the single biggest sequestration opportunity that we have. You know, in terms of its, I think from memory, it's about 2 metric tons of sequestration. That's already, thankfully, in the bank, so to speak, because we're going to benefit from that up to 2030. But as you rightly say, Deputy, this year, I think plantations are down to about 4,000 hectares, about the same as last year. They haven't fallen below that, but that's terribly low relative to our target rate. And we have been engaged in a promotion campaign for the past while, trying to encourage farmers, trying to understand what are the obstacles and blockages. There's no doubt part of it is social. There are issues that can't be summarised in rational economic terms that are preventing plantations. I personally feel that, as only a personal view, Chairman, that the requirement to plant in perpetuity is an issue that needs to be looked at, because people don't like their land being locked into semi-permanent use. And I say that now, I have a vested interest, I have a small forest, I have to say that. That's an issue that I feel needs to be looked at. There was a couple of other points, maybe Frank or Tom might want to pick them up. On the nutritional side, Frank.
Look, I'll try and sweep up some of those issues, and maybe first of all, just go back to Deputy Pringle's question, asking had we enough work. I'm going to start on the climate and greenhouse gas. Had we enough work going on that? And I suppose, look, what our research has done to date is given us the technologies to allow us create a plan to meet our targets without a cut in the national herd. So that's what the research, I think it has been a very successful research programme be great if we had more money to spend on it, but we had what we had. So it has given us that. I think the challenge now is about the immediate challenge is about implementation of those measures and achieving that reduction that's possible. And I think going back to the kind of, I think Deputy Cahill and Deputy Fitzmaurice both mentioned the kind of lambasting of agriculture and farmers around this issue at the moment. I think the most powerful response that could be made is actually to bring forward, or some year, which will hopefully happen very soon, we actually see a reduction in emissions from agriculture. I think that will be a great headline when that comes, because it's been going the other direction for the last number of years. But to move on then to Senator Daly's question about the Green Deal, and I think that's the challenge now for researchers to go, what we say, going beyond the MAC. We have a certain level of technology developed, we can get a certain level of mitigation, but if we talk about being able to play our part or to participate in the Green Deal, well, we're going to need to go beyond the MAC. So there's a lot of research going on about developing new technologies around fertilisers, but also around methane mitigation and so on. And then very much on the sequestration side, whether that's in grassland or in hedgerows or wherever it will be, because that will have to form a part of agriculture's participation in a zero carbon future. So the vegan issue, look, I think the Director said, we're very clear on the nutritional benefits from meat and dairy products in the diet, in particular at particular stages. They're almost indispensable for certain cohorts of people, and I suppose we're not public health experts, so we're not in a position maybe to give dietary advice, but we're very clear on the benefits of those products in the diet. And maybe one very interesting piece of data we did come forward recently. We have access to the national statistics on what people eat. So there's a survey carried out about what Irish people eat, and our researchers divided that up into three cohorts. There was the kind of the people that have a good few jars and the burger and chips on the way home and so on. Maybe not a very healthy kind of a diet, but anyway, we all maybe have our stage of life where we do a little bit of that. And then the other two groups were divided into the kind of group that maybe tried to follow all the good nutritional advice and then maybe the more traditional meat and two veg type cohort of people. And the surprising thing was there was no difference. They were exactly the same. The carbon footprint of the diet that the meat and two veg people ate and the kind of nutritionally careful people ate, which, like, they're not obviously not vegans, but they're people that are conscious of maybe low meat intake, low dairy intake and so on. And yet when you add up together all what they eat and put a carbon footprint on it, it's no different than the people who like their meat and dairy products and potatoes and veg and so on. So it's a very complex debate. And sorry, the guys with the unhealthy diet had much higher carbon footprint. So bad for themselves and bad for the environment maybe. But I think, look, and it's not a simple thing. So that's why moving towards a vegan type diet might not actually, when you come down to count what people eat, it mightn't be the solution either. So it's a nuanced debate. And as I said, I think for agriculture, the good news story will be, when we see a headline, agricultural emissions fall 5% or whatever, just in terms of the calf issue, and the Director has commented a good bit on this, but it's come up a couple of times, so maybe just, what we said about we didn't think of the calves. Well, what my colleague Pat Dillon actually said was that he was part of the Dairy Activation Group, which was kind of a group set up around the time Food Harvest was being dreamed up, and that was about 10 years ago. And this group was started to come up with what needs to be done. We see this potential with quotas going for an increase in milk production. What would need to happen on the ground? And the type of things that came to the fore then were, well, where would the cows come from? Where would the land come from? Where would the processing capacity come from? Where would the labour come from? And I suppose what he was saying was, in those kind of mix of priority issues, the increase in the number of calves wasn't flagged as an issue potentially that would happen. And I suppose, look, 2020, our hindsight is always 2020, but it wasn't. What he was saying, it wasn't envisaged 10 years ago as an issue. But that's not to say that over the last couple of years we haven't been well aware that this issue of the growing number of dairy calves and I suppose the change in dynamic of farmers, and maybe there's less farmers around now that are interested in rearing calves than there was 30 years ago when we had a lot more dairy cows in the country. So look, we've been working on things like the Dairy Beef Index, which is to, I suppose, encourage or help dairy farmers select bulls to breed after they've finished with their replacement breeding, to breed a better calf. I think that's one part of the solution that has to be a major part. Sex semen that was mentioned earlier is another part of the solution, and we see that going beyond the jerseys, because the cohort of calves that are the problem are the male calves that are born when you're trying to breed your replacements, and the more of those that we can reduce, the less of a problem we'll have. It certainly isn't a jersey only issue. If you look at all the calves that were exported last year, about 200,000, or this year, like the majority of those were black and white calves, and you know, we have to think in the long term as well. How are we going to be able to rear and those calves to a good future here in Ireland, because live exports may not last forever. So look, it's a complex problem. It's not as simple as just a change in the EBI or anything like that, and that in itself is a complex issue. The EBI isn't just a group of people sitting around the table and sort of dreaming up, well, I think it should be more of this or more of this. There's a process or an economic model that goes about putting the weightings on things in the EBI. So I think, you know, what we would say, you know, be careful with how you meddle with something that has been successful for dairy farmers for the last 20 years, and stick to the principles of science in terms of setting the weightings on the EBI. There are other ways. I'm not saying the EBI isn't part of the solution, but there are other ways, such as your sex semen and your dairy beef index, that will turn the problem around much faster than you can achieve in the EBI. And just in terms of those calves, we've a new research project started at Grange, which is basically a new self-contained herd of dairy beef calves, and we're rearing 3 groups: Angus and high EBI Holsteins and low EBI Holsteins. And so 3 groups, and just the first results are coming off now, so you know that we don't have that, but that will be ongoing for the next couple of years, and I think the results will be very interesting. And to me, the one thing that's going to come out of it is that management trumps all. You know what I mean? If you have a good calf and you rear him badly, he's still going to lose your money. If you have a bad calf and you rear him well, you have a chance of making money. And I think that shouldn't be lost in the story as well. So for us, the biggest contribution we can probably make is by advice and research around how to actually, you know, get the best performance out of calves on the farm, whatever type of a calf they are. And to me, the current issue around dairy calves is not really, it's more a beef price issue than a dairy calf issue. If the price of beef was €4 or $4.50, there'd be no problem selling all the calves that are born in the country. The problem is we have a huge profitability problem for every beef animal. If you're a suckler farmer, the calves are arriving, there's not much you can do about it, they're coming next.
Demand as well, though.
It certainly does a bit, yeah, but look, we have about the same number of calves in the country now. You know, it's over the last number of years, the balance is shifting. But look, if there was profit in them, there'd be farmers willing to buy them, and that's the challenge. So, what else? The imported protein, yeah. So, just 2 issues here. We certainly are, and the beans have been a reasonably successful crop over the last couple of years. We have a research program around other crops as well, but you know, they're probably going to, the likes of soybean or that, they're going to be probably more challenging and maybe require more support, or as much support as the beans required if they were to get going. But the other side of it is actually how much protein do we need, and we would be quite clear that there's overfeeding of protein to most of our animals, pigs, cattle, and it's actually inside in the MAC curve. It's one of the things that will contribute to reducing emissions as well as to cut back that protein level. So that's an area we'll be addressing with the feed compounders. Look, especially when cows are at grass, there's no need for high protein in the diet at that stage.
One question, Jerry. You mentioned clover, and yes, you're right that clover is good, but my understanding is that if you have a fair bit of clover on land, it's causing bloat in stock. Is that correct?
It's a risk, but it's a management issue, and it certainly is a risk. So you have to manage it, but you know, there's products you can put through the water system that will prevent bloat and so on. But yeah. it's not an unmanageable risk at all, you know, it's.
Deputy Pringles, a follow-on question.
Yeah, if I could just ask you, Frank, just in relation to, you were talking about how your advice on, say, climate change mitigation measures and stuff like that there, how that feeds into national policy. And then, I mean, really into this next cap is where farmers are going to get paid for doing this stuff. That's going to make the difference to it. I'm just wondering how your advice feeds through the department and into the cap and so that like for the urea and the clover and stuff like that there, as basically it's going to come down to if the farmer's getting paid to do it, he'll do it. And I'm just wondering how.
Maybe I might address that. There's a number of mechanisms. Well, first of all, we would have worked very closely with the department in the preparation of the Climate Action Plan, and most of the measures that are in the Climate Action Plan in agriculture stem one way or another from our research work. So that's one channel. Also, the Foodwise 2025 is implemented through a steering group of which I'm a member of. All of the CEOs of the state bodies involved in agriculture sit on that committee. It's chaired by the Minister. So climate action obviously is a central plank. Since the publication of the Climate Action Plan as well, there have been additional steering groups set up, of which we are members of. So we would work very, very closely with the department on this area. It's,
the measures under the cap.
well, no, the cap, well, clearly it's outside our direct control, but clearly there is awareness, and we would look. I would anticipate, although it's not our responsibility, but I would anticipate many of the measures in the cap will have to reflect the suite of measures that we've proposed and are in the Climate Action Plan, because they will require incentivisation at some level, and that's the obvious vehicle to push those through. And again, it's not our direct responsibility, but that's the responsibility of the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. But I think that's the way it'll be driven.